Welcome back. We're looking again at standards-based instruction. Our agenda this time focuses only on the components. We've already looked at the SBI defined and a little research, and now we're focusing on the components. Components for standards-based instruction that you really need to be familiar with are the standards, learning progressions, assessments, feedback, and reporting. And we'll look at each one of these overview, and then we'll look at them more in depth when we start doing our lesson plans. So the standards, as you know, you can go to the standards for your particular state. If you're in Alabama, this is your state standard. For Kentucky, here are your state standards, and you will go to those websites and you will look at that on your own. Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida. Now, if you are from outside of the Southern Union, then you simply need to Google your state and the State Department of Education and the standards, and you'll find them. For this class, however, you must use the NAD standards. But why do I include the state standards? Because I find that there's a lot of resources on the state standards website, especially, and not because I'm from Florida, but especially the CPOMS website. I think of all the ones for the Southern Union, you probably have more resources on the CPOMS website for all subject areas, but especially, well, all of them. The Alabama website is a very good one. The Mississippi website, you can tell if they've updated it for college and career readiness standards, such as Alabama and Mississippi, then you know that you're getting more than just the standards there. So what we would do then is when we start working on the standards, you would list the standard for NAD, find a comparable standard for your state if you're trying to find some additional resources to help you to pull everything together for your standards-based instruction lesson plans. Now, let's look at learning progressions. So the first one is the standards, then the learner progressions. What are learning progressions? They're a series of related goals that culminate in the attainment of a more complex learning goal. Learning progressions are also used to track progress of students, and that's from Marzano. That's Marzano's definition of what learning progressions are. They're basically the same from everyone, but this is just a different look at it. Someone else says that learning progressions provide a blueprint for instruction and assessment. They identify what to assess and when to assess it. This is very important. And that requires intentional sequencing instruction from simple to complex demonstrations of learning. So you start with those small things and you pull it together so that it can be complex, because as we looked at with our definitions of what standards-based instruction is, we're supposed to look at those things that are challenging for the students. So learning progressions allow us to go from the basic, from the simple to the more complex. And that definition is provided by Schimmer, Hillman, and Stateletz. Now, let's look some more at learning progressions. If we said that it's learning goals, that they are help to track the progress of students, that they provide a blueprint for instruction and identify what to assess, when to assess it, and it's supposed to be intentional, then what are they? Well, here is one set of learning goals that could be used, that you can say that this is a learning progression. So this is where you're trying to get to for the students. All these learning goals are based on one standard that I got from the NAD website and social studies website, and I think it was 7th grade. But 8th grade. Students will be able to explain civic responsibility, how civic responsibility is exercised by voting. Students will be able to compare and contrast diverse cultural and ideological viewpoints. And students will recognize the necessity of compromise in balancing the majority rule and an insistence upon minority rights. Those are 3 learning goals taken from standards that you will do soon, not yet. And then we call these, taken together, we call this a learning progression. Then the next piece of the puzzle would be assessments. There are 2 basic types of assessments, and you will have this also separately in a different video in the series that focuses definitely on assessment. Can't say too much about it, but formative assessment primarily designed to educate and improve student performance. Activities undertaken by teachers and their students in assessing themselves. Formative assessment provides information to be used as feedback to modify teaching and learning activities. And formative assessment encompasses a whole host of tools that provide feedback to teachers or to students to help students learn more effectively. So you see how the feedback and the formative assessment are connected. Formative assessment Additionally, it informs the students and those supporting the teacher and the students. Herein is the feedback about the learning goals. So you see how these are all coming together. So formative assessment helps the student to know where they are, helps the teacher to know where they are, and it helps them to know where they are in reference to the learning goal. The formative assessment informs about where students are in relation to the learning goal and what can be done to improve it, subsequent performance. Also, formative assessments can be graded, however, it's not suggested. The evaluations of these assessments, but usually for evaluation, however, it's not usually factored into the final grade as would be the summative assessment. So the focus is on assessing the student understanding and teaching effectiveness, and it occurs in two primary forms. It's usually spontaneous, but it can be planned as well. So think about this. What are some examples of formative assessment that you've used? I'll pause, and you can say them. Well, of course, I didn't hear you, but I just thought I'd give you a moment of silence so you could think about it. Now think about, how did your students respond to the formative assessments? Let's look at a few. Formative assessments. Here are some that we consider to be checkpoints, help you to know where they are. Remember all those things that we said. Peer evaluation, where they're having their peers evaluate them as in an ongoing format. Observation, where you walk around, observation leading to it with a checklist where you check off whether or not they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Or questioning, where you're asking specific intentional questions about something that is being taught or shared. Exit cards, where they have to turn in exit cards or exit tickets before they leave, but they know they have to do them in advance. Portfolio encounter or journal check. This is not grading the portfolio or the journal. This is simply checking to put a date on it or something to let them know that you are looking at it. Or it could be a quiz that could be turned in for the final grade or not. Or it could be self-assessment, where they're telling what they think about what they did themselves. And so a word about summative assessment. It's kind of the opposite, but works in tandem with the formative. These are cumulative assessments, ongoing, that intended to capture what a student has learned or the quality of the learning and judge performance against some standard that's been set up. Summative assessments includes not only multiple choice questions, but also extended response items and technology enhanced items, as well as performance tasks. And we will, at the end, take a look at portfolio assessment, a video clip of portfolio assessment, but not right now. So summative assessments, when we think about summative assessment and the performance task, this is the performance task that's been given for a particular project that they had to do, or an oral presentation, and this is at the end of the unit. A demonstration that they had to do at the end of the unit. A product or exhibit that they had to do at the end of the unit. A portfolio review, and this is when you actually assess the portfolio with the rubrics that you've designed, and then, or a unit test, which has been the most common in the past, but we want to make use of some of these others, not just the unit test. Now, when you think about feedback, which is the next component, we've already mentioned that feedback goes along with the assessment, goes along with the learning goals. But three things you need to think about with feedback is that feedback is establishing where the learners are in their learning, establishing where they're going, and establishing what needs to be done to get them there. So you see how this works with the learning goals and with the assessment. Three conditions for the feedback to be effective, and they've done meta-analysis on this to find out effective feedback. It happens when the learner has to possess a concept of the standard. That is, they have to understand what the standard is aimed for. The learner must compare the actual or current level of performance that they have in relationship to the standard, and that the learner must engage in appropriate action which leads to some closure of the gap related to the standard or the learning goal. Okay? And then we get to reporting part. Traditionally, reporting has to do with grades. Whichever type of reporting format that you're using right now, if it's the NAD format, it can be used for standards-based instruction, and we'll talk about that later on, not now, but just know that for reporting, grades should reflect the student's performance on specific learning criteria. Just putting down a letter grade of A, C, B, F does not let you know about the performance criteria, the learning criteria. It just says what the grade is. So for standards-based instruction, we need to start by having a clear purpose, followed by an in-depth understanding of the various criteria that can be used for the students. And you have to have a link between the curriculum standards with the grading and the reporting system. And as I've said, we'll look at some of the Hunter format, some of the other systems that are being used out there that you guys are using if you're in North American Division, and how you can use that to link the curriculum standards with the reporting system so that you don't have to necessarily depend on the letter grade A, B, C, D, E, F. Reporting must be valid, reliable, fair, and useful, each one of these. It means it must be consistent. And if you're using the standard, it's going to be valid and reliable. If you're using the standard, it's going to be fair. If you're using the feedback, and it's going to be useful, if, as I said, if you're using the feedback, so that the student, you don't just jump and say, okay, now let's go to the next lesson. Let's make sure that you have mastered it before we go on. Okay? So those are the components of standards-based instruction. You have the standards, the learning progressions, assessments, feedback, and reporting. So we want to help our students to remember that they're not to compare their progress to that of others, because we have to remember that we all need our own time to travel our own distance, and we help our students to that end. Okay? So we're going to now just jump to, I promised you a quick video. We're going to jump to the video dealing with portfolio, okay? Portfolio assessment in the elementary classroom. It's been a pleasure. Have a great day.
Okay, friends, what we're going to do is we're going to switch gears a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to work on stuff for portfolio review, where we're going to look specifically at ways that we can improve our writing based on our profiles. Now, friends, can you open up your notebook, please, to the first page so you can look at your questionnaire that you have? Everyone, please look up here. Okay, friends, we're going to be working on our portfolio reflections. Now, we've done one for math, we've done one for art, we've done one for science, we've done stuff for social studies. What we have to do now is for writing, okay? And so what we're going to do...
Portfolio assessment is really the most authentic and meaningful way, I feel, that students can really assess their work, and also teachers can also evaluate student work. There are many different definitions for what a portfolio is. In our particular school, a portfolio is a collection of work that the students have worked on over the course of the year. And they've taken these different pieces and they've really studied what they've learned, they've studied what things they can improve on, and they've also kind of set out goals from where they need to go next with each individual piece of work.
Alice and I are going to pass back your finals that you have here of the profiles that you did at the beginning of the year. I want you to focus on 3 sentences that you wrote. With each of those sentences, now knowing what you know about adjectives, what you know about nouns, I find it quite interesting. Good. Friends, what you now know about nouns and what you know about verbs, you can make that writing stronger. So I want you to take 3 of those sentences, and then with the second part, what you're going to do is that you're going to take each of those old sentences and then you're going to make them stronger. You're going to make them come alive.
Within every 2 to 3 weeks, students collect work that they've done. It ranges from all the different subject areas, so it can be math, science, writing, reading. And what they do is they take those particular works and they first ask, is this something that I can really talk about? Is it something I can write about to show my learning? After identifying that particular pieces, they write out a reflection. So they're asked to do, what is this work about? What are things that I've learned from it? What things am I going to move on from here? And why is this particular piece meaningful to me? The next part, what they do is that they go through a process of drafting, talking with the teacher, examining the particular work, looking at the goals, and then setting up new goals to improve their work.
Okay, so that's one adjective that you have into. Okay. Most favorite soccer team is the Boston Breakers. The same way that you gave more detail to the word for this particular piece, what's another way that you could add more detail to Boston Breakers? Well, okay, let's do it this way. I know you like baseball. How would you describe the Red Sox?
Hard to beat.
Hard to beat. Okay, so you can say the hard to beat Red Sox. Okay. Now, you could also maybe do the same thing with Boston Breakers, right? The hard to beat Boston Breakers. Hard to beat, if you were to add that in, right, would be describing Boston Breakers more. But do you know a lot about the Boston Breakers?
Not really.
No, I don't either. So how do
Well,
I think what happens with portfolios is that it really requires a more one-to-one relationship. It requires a more in-depth study of what a child can do, and also what a teacher can do to shape instruction.
Okay, here he has a fish, and then you added gold to describe the fish. I think you can also talk about a little bit more about the goldfish. How would you describe it?
big and yellow.
Okay, yeah, so those are things that you can add into it, make it more descriptive.
When we're on that one, is there something you would do differently?
Mm-hmm.
Should we actually write? I wrote these 3 sentences.
Yeah.
I changed them to this.
You could change them, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that would work. Can you show me the sentences you had before?
Yeah.
And then Rosemar, I'll check yours too. Okay, what was your first sentence?
I asked him what his favorite subject was.
Okay. And what did you write next?
I queried to him, what is your favorite subject and why do you like it?
Okay, so you used a different verb this time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a stronger verb. What about number 3?
You mean this one?
Oh, yeah. It took me
3 days to write it all.
to write it. What did you change it to?
It dragged out 3 long, tiring, used-up days for me to type the seemingly endless list of numbers.
That's good. That's good.
I think portfolios assessment is important because it gives opportunity for teachers to really get to know their students. It really looks at all the complexities of what their work represents. When a kid does a piece, it isn't just something that's written, but it has many other things that are involved with it. Any educator will tell you that it's not just me teaching this lesson, but it's also working on the social and emotional growth of this child. It's working how this child works with the community, how this child works with the family. So I think one of the most powerful things about portfolios is that it really looking at the whole picture of the child. And then a lot of kids, too, are really shut off initially when they start because they can't perform in the most traditional sense, like on a standardized test, and really opening up those opportunities for them to really express themselves in a variety of different ways makes them feel successful. And when they feel successful, then other successes will just fall in line.